They chained him, beat him, and forced him to fight for sport. But what they didn't know is that he'd nearly bring Rome to its knees. This is not a myth, not a movie. This is the real story of Spartacus, the slave who became a gladiator, and then led a rebellion so massive, it terrified the most powerful empire on earth. And what happened next? You're not going to believe it. Alright, let's dive in. This story begins around 111 BCE, somewhere in Thrace, modern-day Bulgaria. Spartacus is born into a tough, tribal world. We don't know much about his early life, but we do know that Thrace was constantly caught in the crossfire between Rome and other rival powers. The Romans saw the Thracians as wild, unpredictable, dangerous, which to Rome meant they were perfect for fighting and for enslaving. Spartacus may have been a soldier in the Roman auxiliary at some point. That's a fancy way of saying cheap muscle Rome hired from conquered lands. But something went wrong. He was either captured as a deserter or simply enslaved after a campaign. The records don't agree. But either way, Spartacus went from free man to property. Shackled, beaten, branded, sold like livestock. His destination? A gladiator school in Capua, Italy. Now let's talk about what that meant. Gladiator schools weren't just training centers. They were blood factories. Brutal prisons run by men like Lentulus Batiatus who didn't care if you lived or died, so long as the crowds were entertained. The food was barely enough. The training was savage. Every day was a test of survival. You either got tough or got killed. And yet, it was here, in the dust and blood of the arena, that Spartacus started planning something no one saw coming. Now, if you're picturing Russell Crowe and shouting crowds, take a step back. Real gladiators didn't always fight to the death. Death was bad for business. But the training, that was worse. Every second was pain. Every friend could become your enemy. There was no trust, just sweat, blood, and steel. But Spartacus was watching, quiet, calculating, waiting. And then, one day in 73 BCE, the chance came. Around 70 gladiators, just 70, launched an escape. They broke out of the training school using kitchen knives, cleavers, spits, anything sharp they could get their hands on. Sounds crazy, but it worked. They fought their way out, hijacked wagons full of real weapons, and disappeared into the countryside. And just like that, Rome had a problem, a big one. These weren't just runaway slaves. These were trained killers, warriors with nothing to lose. Spartacus, along with two other leaders, Crixus and Enemaus, took charge. And instead of running and hiding, they went up Mount Vesuvius. Yeah, the same volcano that would later bury Pompeii. Back then, it was a hideout. Rome laughed. They figured this was just a minor rebellion, a joke. So they sent a small force, just a few thousand men, to go up the mountain and finish it. Bad move. Spartacus pulled a trick that would make any general proud. His people weaved ropes from vines, climbed down the cliffs on the far side of the mountain, came around behind the Roman forces and wiped them out. Total shock. That was the moment Rome realized this wasn't a joke. More and more slaves, peasants, and outcasts began to join Spartacus. Word spread fast. He wasn't just a fugitive now, he was a symbol. Within months, his forces grew from dozens to thousands. Men, women, children, all following a former slave who had beaten the system. And Spartacus didn't just survive, he started winning battles. Real battles. He defeated Roman praetors. He humiliated consuls. He raided Roman estates and armed his people with looted weapons. For 2 years, he marched through the Italian countryside, a storm the Senate couldn't seem to stop. Now, here's the part people often get wrong. Spartacus didn't want to destroy Rome. He wasn't out to conquer. His goal was freedom. He wanted to lead his people out of Italy, across the Alps back to their homelands. He had the numbers. He had the momentum. But not everyone agreed. Some of his commanders, like Crixus, wanted to stay and keep fighting. They wanted revenge. They believed they could actually take Rome. Spartacus disagreed. But cracks were forming in the rebellion. And that's when Rome sent someone serious. Marcus Licinius Crassus. This guy was rich, like Jeff Bezos plus Elon Musk rich. And he was hungry for power. Crassus didn't play games. He took over the campaign and brought discipline back with terror. One of the first things he did, when some of his soldiers panicked and ran during a skirmish, he punished them with decimation. That's not just a word. It's an actual Roman practice. Every 10th man in the unit was executed by their own comrades. No trial, no mercy, just a brutal reminder. Fear me more than the enemy. And you know what? It worked. Crassus rebuilt the Roman army's confidence. He fortified positions, cut off supply routes, laid traps, and little by little he started cornering Spartacus. Meanwhile, Spartacus tried a desperate gamble. He made a deal with Cilician pirates, basically the mafia of the Mediterranean, paying them to ferry his army out of Italy by sea. And guess what? They took the money and disappeared. No ships, no escape, trapped. This is where Spartacus showed just how human he really was. Because in that moment, he could have surrendered. He could have abandoned his people and fled. But instead, he doubled down. He armed blacksmiths. He built weapons. He drilled his forces. He prepared them not to flee, but to fight. Not to survive, but to go down on their feet. In early 71 BCE, Crassus launched the final assault. Spartacus had tried to break out past him once, twice, 3 times, but Crassus held the line. Spartacus and his army were pinned in the southern tip of Italy. Crassus, wanting to end it, built a giant wall, a trench and fortification stretching across the whole peninsula, to box them in. Yeah, you heard that right. He built a wall across the land to trap them, over 30 miles long. But Spartacus wasn't done yet. In the final days, he broke through the wall just barely. He and his most loyal fighters escaped and regrouped. But they were low on food, low on supplies, low on hope. And then came the last stand. On the plains of Lucania, the two armies met. Spartacus had somewhere between 50,000 to 70,000 people, many of them untrained, half-starved, and exhausted. Crassus had about 120,000, disciplined, organized, fully armed. Spartacus rode out in front of his army. And this is where the story becomes legend. He killed his own horse in front of everyone. He looked at his army and said something along the lines of, "If we win, I won't need a horse, and if we lose, I won't need it either." They say he charged straight for Crassus himself, fighting like a demon, hacking through line after line. But eventually, the weight of Rome crushed them. Spartacus was killed in battle. His body was never found. But Rome's revenge didn't stop there. Crassus captured about 6,000 rebels. And what did he do? He crucified every single one, lining the roads from Capua to Rome. The Appian Way became a forest of crosses. A warning, a message, never rebel. And yet, the message backfired. Because instead of erasing Spartacus, they made him eternal. Now let's zoom out for a second. Why does this story matter? Because it's not just about swords and sandals. It's about the human spirit. Spartacus wasn't a king. He wasn't a general. He wasn't born into power. He was a slave, a nobody. And yet, he stood up. He fought. He almost broke the spine of the greatest empire in the world. And for a moment, a brief, shining moment, he gave thousands of people hope. Real hope. The kind you'd follow into battle. Now sure, Rome survived. Crassus got his glory. He became one of the richest and most powerful men in Roman history. But he never escaped Spartacus's shadow. Not really. Because today, 2,000 years later, we don't remember Crassus for his money. We remember Spartacus for his courage. And if that's not victory, I don't know what is. So the next time someone tells you that one person can't change anything, remind them of the slave who fought an empire. If that gripped you, the next video waiting on your screen will blow your mind. Hit play.